Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm here today. I have the honor of being joined with Kirstyn Lazur. She is the owner of TOEFL Land, and she is here today to talk about TOEFL Writing Task number 1, going to be a guide for you to help you write an essay easier. And just, Kirstyn, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Josh. I know you have so many students out there watching your channel, so it's an honor to be here and just talk TOEFL.
No, it's great. I think that having different perspectives is great. And there's so many talented individuals like yourself that know a lot about this test and that can really benefit, that students can benefit a lot. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. I'm ready to learn. And I might interrupt and have some questions as we go as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really excited. So TOEFL Writing Task number 1, tell me about it.
Writing task number 1. So I'll just give you a little background. When I first started teaching TOEFL and writing task number 1, I did not advise students to use templates. You know, I was really adamant about helping them with their writing and helping them become more fluent in their writing. And I thought the template was, or what a lot of people commonly call the template, you can call it a guide, a template. I know Miguel Macarno, one of our colleagues, calls it the recipe. And no matter what you call it, it's just words that are structured a certain way to help you write an essay. And I really didn't teach like that in the beginning because I wanted students to develop their own thoughts, their own ideas. And after some time, I realized, how can I help them? How can I serve them? How can we get this essay done in 20 minutes? Because 20 minutes to write writing task number 1 is not a lot of time. And so you really have to be quick and focus on what's important. And so that's how I developed my guide for writing task number 1. And it happens to be a song, because who doesn't love a song and a dance? So it became a song, and it became this way for students to remember for test day, a quick way to help them organize their thoughts and their writing for writing task number 1. So I'm going to just share my screen with you and your students. And I just, kind of what I just said, I want to talk a little bit about templates just to start. And I have a little sad face right here because we really do have to be careful when we use templates. For one, they don't always work in every TOEFL situation. And as we know, this test shifts and changes with the times. So that's why a lot of books right now for writing task number 1 are outdated, because they're echoing an older version of the writing task number 1. So you really do have to be careful. Sometimes TOEFL will change. I am not a psychic. I don't know what will happen on your test, on your day that you take it, right? So, we just have to be wise. Most of the time, right, that we get the report that reading and lecture disagree. So my template is designed for that. It's not really designed for a different situation.
Well, one thing I was gonna ask you, some people might be wondering, what if a lot of people use books, older books, what's something that might be different in an older book or in another book compared to what they can expect on test day?
Yeah, great question. So, first of all, let's talk about relationships. And I'll just stop my share for a second. So in the old days, when I first started teaching TOEFL, there were kind of 3 different relationships you'd see between reading and lecture, right? So if you're very new to TOEFL and you don't know what writing task number 1 is yet, you'll get a reading and you have 3 minutes to read it. And then you'll listen to a lecture and probably you'll take some notes on that lecture. And then you have 20 minutes to summarize the reading and lecture and describe the relationship between the 2. So in the old days, there were kind of 3 different types of relationships. You could have opposite opinions where, reading says dogs are the best pets and lecture says, no, they're not the best pets. So that would be a contrast, right? Then you had a relationship with a problem. Maybe the reading presented some problems that are going on. Maybe it's about the environment. And the lecture presented solutions. And that one actually has kind of sometimes weaved its way back over the years. Sometimes I hear students reporting that they do sometimes rarely get that one. And then there was, in the very old days, a reading which kind of presented a definition of a term pretty generally. And then the lecture would support the points made in the reading with a more specific example. Kind of like speaking task number, what is it now? Number 3, where we got the reading and the lecture, and they support one another. So that was kind of the old style. You could have gotten one of those 3 relationships. And also in the old style, it was sometimes you got points, maybe you got 2 points in the reading, and then you had maybe 3 points in the lecture, or maybe you had 3 or 4 points in the reading, and they were kind of out of order, and the lecture would kind of mix up the order of where those points would match. And now we have a situation where pretty typically the reading and lecture disagree. You have 3 points in the reading, and they make it very clear, here's point 1, here's point 2, here's point 3, kind of separate paragraphs. And then you have the lecture that will correspond with that point. If they talk about, you know, dogs over here, they're going to talk about dogs over here, first point, and it's going to be something opposing. So, you know, if you're using an old book, you do have to be aware if you see a different format than those 3 points in the reading and lecture, then you're working with old materials, and it's best to try to get a source that is current and up to date.
That's great. Yeah, I think that I when I first started teaching, you know, I had a book, I used Pearson's book, and they had different types of integrated writing where, like, sometimes they agreed, sometimes they disagreed. And after kind of going on my own and you know, we're looking more at ETS TOEFL stuff, you know, especially recently, I realized that they always disagree. I mean, I still haven't seen or heard of an instance where the reading and listening doesn't disagree. And yeah, like you said, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, agree, disagree. So great, that's great. And so sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, that's fine.
Yeah, so so templates. So you didn't recommend them at first. Now you find them to be helpful, I guess, a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know, we have to be wise when you use them. So you know, if we're addicted to the template, it's like any addiction. It can hurt you rather than help you. So if you have a really rigid structure that you're always wanting to use that same sentence, but perhaps that sentence really doesn't make sense in the context that TOEFL's giving you on that particular writing task 1. So you do have to be flexible. You can't, you know, memorize certain structures and sentences and expect them to work every single time. The other reason I don't really like templates is that they can slow down your writing progress, or even stop you from becoming fluent. Because let's face it, like we like something that's easy, and if, oh, I can just memorize this, it becomes something I fall back on. But it really doesn't help you progress as a writer. So if you're gonna go on to graduate school, or maybe you're just entering university, you are gonna have to, you know, up your game and learn more advanced writing skills. So, you know, I would advise to, you know, shed the rigidness of any template you're holding on to when you get to that next level of your writing. Okay, so now that I trashed templates, now I'm going to teach you a template. But yeah, so, you know, I'm not a big fan of template writing, as I just said, but why am I giving you a song as a template that you can use in your writing? Well, I tried it out with my students, and the thing is they encountered success. They just got more successful in their writing when they started using it. So when my students began to use this template, their essays, organization, sentence structure began to improve. They reported feeling more confident, less stressed out while writing this task, not only in class, but also on test day.
Mm.
And my students saved time. So they could focus more on summarizing the details of the reading and the lecture instead of worrying about fancy setups or worrying about an introduction, how they were going to say it. They already knew how they were going to say it, and they could just focus on summarizing.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what's a fancy setup?
Oh my gosh, I've seen a lot of fancy setups. You know, and you'll see in my template, I'm really simple. I'm just really direct to the point, and I don't use a lot of words. But I've seen a lot of, and now I will discuss the points in the reading and how they contrast with the points made in the lecture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would be like a kind of long and wordy sentence, and my, you know, guide, my writing task 1 guide, just doesn't have a big long sentences. It's really short and sweet.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, what kind of changed exactly? You kind of mentioned it here, but like, so, you know, when you first started, didn't like templates so much, and you still feel like, you know, they're not a great way to write and to grow as a writer. Um, but you know, you're gonna you have a song, and you're gonna teach us a little bit about the template. So you kind of say it here already, but what exactly changed?
Yeah, I think for one, you know, because I wanted to help my students so much. So for
Right.
one, it really eased their stress level.
Right.
So it really helped them. And when I saw their writing, I could see a marked improvement. It just got, their essays became more clear. Their grammar improved a lot. And it's not like I'm giving a whole lot for the template, but they just became more conscious. Even those little things, for example, like subject-verb agreement.
Mm.
I've seen countless essays, right, where it'll say something like, the lecture say that.
Right, right.
And it should say the lecture says that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really simple, easy one, but it's in my song, all of those present tense, and I like to summarize in the present tense.
Right.
That's what you typically do as an academic anyway. You know, I went to school, I was an English literature major. I would summarize novels. I would summarize books that I was reading and analyze them.
Mm.
And whenever I was summarizing the book, it would be in present tense, right? So like, oh, super easy. You could just use simple present tense. And that little thing like adding that S, you know, when it's in the song, suddenly it's already done for you. You're doing it automatically and you're
Right.
not making that mistake anymore. And the
Mm.
focus for them became more on summarizing, okay, how do I create a really great sentence to summarize what I just read or summarize what I just listened to.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that kind of silly grammar errors were gone.
Right, right. Okay, great. So it helped improve the grammar in general, and especially some really not, I don't want to say easy ones, but just something that you could avoid easily with a template.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Yep. Yeah, and then I just want to reiterate that, you know, again, you don't have to use the words that I'm using. You don't have to get attached to, they're going to give you a high score. So it's like, do you have to use the words I'm about to give you to get a high score? No, you don't. You can certainly use what works for you. That's the whole point, is use what's easy and what works for you. There are many different ways you could write your writing task. Number 1, essay. This is not the only way. And also keep in mind that these words alone won't help you reach a high score. You have to have excellent paraphrasing skills and the ability to catch the details in the lecture so that you can summarize them. So, you know, the template or the guide or the recipe is not the be-all, end-all. You have a lot of work to do still, even if you have this helper.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing that I get asked a lot about, maybe you do as well, is paraphrasing.
Yes.
Do you have any I don't know, advice or activities or anything like that? So, you know, some student, I actually responded to a comment the other day. A student asked, you know, is using synonyms enough? You know, is it okay to just use the same word a different, you know, the same meaning of the word a different way? instead of saying happy, say glad, that kind of thing. Um, and my answer was probably not, because a lot of times synonyms sound pretty awkward when you kind of just, say the same word, say the same meaning of a word with just a different word choice. Do you have any advice for paraphrasing? Any like activities you recommend or anything like that?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll give you my quick and dirty 3 things that I do when I paraphrase.
Oh, great.
And you can do this with, pick up any, I'm looking at my desk right here. I have a National Geographic on the table with a big dinosaur. So right now in my reading class, we're reading about dinosaurs, and I'm having the students paraphrase.
Okay.
And so, looking at a text like that, really any magazine, you could pick up anything or anything online, and take the original sentence, for yourself. And then what you're going to do is pull out the important words. So I always look at subject, I look at verb, I look at object. So if you can identify those parts of the sentence, and if you have a big sentence, chances are you have some commas. Those commas might tell you more information about something that happened before it. That would be extra information. I'm not going to pay too much attention to that right away when I paraphrase, because I just want to it's kind of like getting the main idea of a sentence. I just want to get the important stuff. So subject, verb, object. And once I pull those out, I actually write them down on a piece of paper for myself. And this is very helpful too on the reading section with the paraphrase question. So I pull those out. And then after that, if I'm going to paraphrase the sentence myself, I try not to look. I will block out that original sentence. I'm just going to block it and just look at the notes, the important words that I wrote down that I thought were important. Some of those words, maybe I can use a synonym. Okay, but that's not going to be the answer. That's not going to give me a really good paraphrase. You really have to look at the whole meaning of the entire thought, in order to be able to put it into other words. And some words you're not going to be able to find a synonym. If I'm talking about a T-Rex, in a dinosaur, I'm not going to find a synonym for T-Rex. It's just going to be T-Rex. So some words you will use, and some words you might be able to. And always ask yourself, how can I make this easier? Can I make this word, for example, let's say the word is deduce. Can I just say something like figure out? Because that's how I would talk. I wouldn't necessarily say deduce, but I would say the phrasal verb figure out. So maybe that's a good synonym. The next thing I do is I basically look at the possibility of an order switch. This doesn't work all the time, but sometimes it works, where you take maybe a second part of the sentence and bring it in the first part, and kind of switch. I'm not going to change the meaning, of course, but I might switch the order in which something happens. So if I have he is tired because he ran, maybe I start with because he ran, he is tired. I just switch the order of that occurrence. The other little rule I have with paraphrase is don't use more than 3 of the same words of the original sentence. And of course I'm moving down here a little bit. So yeah, that's just kind of a good academic rule to keep in mind, because if you get to 4 or more of the same exact words as the original, you probably need to shift things a little bit more to make it sound more like your own. And of course, this becomes super important if you're at university, because you don't want to be accused of plagiarism, which is stealing somebody else's words and putting that in your research paper or thesis, whatever you're writing. So that's the whole point of writing task number 1, is it's simulating for us this academic experience of summarizing information, and can we do it in our own words without sounding exactly like the original.
Right.
So Yeah, so that would be my 3 kind of tips. Like, yes, you might change a word, but change it so that it sounds like it's more natural for something that you would say.
Right.
You might think about switching the order, and then don't use more than 3 of the same words that the original sentence has.
Great. That's 3 easy things to remember. So I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So synonyms, and I think that, what you said, to make it more in your own words, to make it something that feels more natural to you is great, especially for the speaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Feels natural.
Good.
Yeah.
Right, so okay, so sorry to interrupt. So you'd have to paraphrase for the integrated writing, and so I guess now you're going to talk about the format.
Yeah, and we already talked about this a little bit in the beginning, so I don't really have to go over what the format is, but we already said there's a reading, there's a lecture. And I like to start simple, just really basic. So I just chose cats. Cats and dogs are like basic 101 for me. So let's just say, for example, the reading is saying cats are the best pets, and the lecture just disagrees with that. Cats are not the best. And then we have these 3 points. Okay, we read in the reading that, oh, cats are so great because they're independent. We can leave and they'll be fine. They can eat for themselves and take care of all their bathroom needs themselves, right? But the lecture says, no, cats are not so independent. They're really needy. When you come back from vacation, the cat's really mad at you. They don't want to look at you. They're just ignoring you all the time. They're really hurt that you left. Let's say point number 2. Yeah, we got to make it fun, right? I'm all about it. Yeah.
That's true.
So let's say the reading says, okay, cats are really cute. They're cuddly. But lecture says, no, they just scratch you.
Right.
And let's say the reading point number 3, it's say cats are great companions. You can talk to them about all your problems. But the lecture says, no, cats are annoying. They are meowing. They're making noise at 3 a.m. They keep you up all night. Okay, so let's say this is the reading lecture we're working with. I wish TOEFL was this easy all the time.
Sure.
So here's your guide. Here's your recipe that I like to use that I'll offer up. So how I do this is I start with an introduction. My introduction is really short. I just have 2 sentences. Okay. And in the first sentence, I'm just going to state the topic. Both the reading and the lecture discuss, in this case, cats. So just the noun, that the easiest thing, the thing they're talking about, both talking about cats. Right. Okay, and then the second sentence, while the reading says that cats are the best pets, the lecture disagrees. So I'm just going to state the relationship, and then I am moving on. That's it. That's my entire introduction. Okay. Okay, so nice and short and sweet.
The do you usually recommend starting with the reading and then the listening? Is that, so some people say listening then reading, so there's some disagreement. But when you're structuring the essay, you usually start with the reading?
I do, yeah. And it's been done both ways. I think the verdict is it doesn't matter which way you do it, your score will not be affected. I do start with the reading just because that's also what I start with when I read first, and then I hear the lecture. So in my mind, just to keep it organized, that's what I like to do. I like to start with the reading summary and then move to the lecture. But of course, like we discussed in the beginning, you can make this your own. So if you wanted to start with the lecture, totally cool, that's fine. And then summarize the reading. So writer's choice on that one. Either way works. Yeah. So my supporting paragraph number 1 is just going to deal with point number 1 from reading and lecture. So I'm going to start by saying, first, the reading claims that, and then I'm going to insert point number 1 from the reading. So that was about the cats are the best pets because they're independent, they don't need anyone. And I would recommend here at least 2 sentences of summary from the reading. Okay. And then when you transition to the lecture, however, the lecture insists that, and then here we had, cats are not as independent as we think. In fact, they're really needy. And I would recommend that students write at least 3 or 4 sentences, if possible, to summarize the lecture. So a little bit more summary of the lecture, I think, is important, because your TOEFL grader knows it's pretty easy to look at your screen and summarize the reading. It's going to be right there. It doesn't disappear.
Right.
But it's a little more challenging to summarize those details from the lecture. So the more kind of details you can catch from point number 1 and bring them in and make that summary a little bit longer, I would say the better.
Okay.
Okay. And then moving on, same thing we're going to do for supporting paragraph 2, but of course, TOEFL looks for a variety of word choice. So I'm going to switch up my verbs. I'm going to start by saying next, the reading asserts that. And then my point number 2 is cats are cute and cuddly. And then in contrast, the lecture argues that, in fact, cats are not cute and cuddly. They scratch you and they're very nasty. Now, notice I prefer to keep the reading and the lecture the same. I've seen a lot of essays that will switch these up, and they'll switch it to, instead of saying the reading, the author, or the writer,
right. Okay.
or the article, and maybe each paragraph they'll switch it up every time.
Right.
Or the lecture might be the speaker, or the professor,
Right.
the lecturer. I prefer to keep it the same throughout the whole essay, and here's why. It's a lot clearer that you're referring to the same source.
Oh.
So if I'm reading an essay and all of a sudden, oh, the writer, or oh, the author, and you previously were calling it the reading, it's just a little bit jarring for me to see a new word for it. That's just my personal preference. And I also think it goes back to that academic, style of your references. Your references are your references. If we were talking about an article that Joe Smith wrote and another, journal article that, let's say, I don't know, David Jones wrote, right? So I'd call them Smith and Jones. Well, Smith said this and Jones said that, or I'd have it in an in-body citation, right? Okay. So for me, it's just kind of like doing that. And so it's going to be the same referent for me each time. I just find it more clear, but, again, writer's choice. That's just my preference. Yep. And then the last thing here, supporting paragraph 3, I'm just going to say, finally, the reading states that. And then we had cats make great companions. Transition, on the other hand, the lecture points out that cats are annoying. And I do not have a conclusion for my writing task number 1. I don't think it's necessary. Otherwise, you sound like you're repeating yourself too much. So when I took the TOEFL test, I did not write a conclusion. I just used this, this guide. Okay, great.
And you mentioned that the listening, you'll say more from the listening than the reading. And I think that's an important point because, like you said, that you can actually see the reading when you're writing. And that's where paraphrasing gets really important. And then also, so since you could see the reading, you probably don't have to say as much about it as the listening.
Yeah, and I get a lot of students that get really tripped up with, oh, what's important with the reading, or how do I know what's important to summarize? And they're really kind of focused on that. And really, my focus is on the lecture. I really want to get those details, and I want to summarize as much of that as possible. The reading, in general, this is so in general, but I will look, of course, at the topic sentence. The first sentence that introduces each paragraph is probably going to give me that main idea of the paragraph. So that's a good place to start when you're looking to summarize. And I might, see the second sentence or even the last sentence of that paragraph, but I'm not going to summarize a whole lot of detail from the reading. It's really the main idea of whatever that paragraph is, whatever that point number 1 is. Yeah.
Okay, great. And no conclusion necessary. That was the hardest thing for me teaching was to get used to, because it feels so strange writing an essay without a conclusion. But yeah, after teaching it for a while and having a lot of students do really well without a conclusion, it seems to be just fine.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, you can, it's not
Right,
wrong to, you can have a conclusion.
right.
It's just that, you know, whenever I try to write one for writing task number one, it's like, oh, I'm saying the same thing. Oh, both the reading and lecture discuss cats and they have opposite opinions. You know, it's too repetitive of everything that's already came before. And yeah, you don't need to waste. I would say spend your time with the details of the lecture instead of worrying about writing a conclusion.
Right. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm. So here's my little trick for this. I've made it a song.
Okay.
I'll go through like the lyrics of the song first, and then I'll just sing it to you. And I have a music video too. I'll give you the link, but this is just a solo performance. You know, I don't have my crew with me on the whole music video.
And yeah, I'll make sure all the links for any guides or any videos or anything that is helpful in the description as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's how this little song goes. Both the reading and lecture discuss. Both the reading and lecture discuss. While the reading says that, the lecture disagrees. While the reading says that, the lecture disagrees. And then I have this little these letters here. There's 6 letters, and this helps me remember the verbs that I'm going to use. Okay, and just a little trick. It starts with CIA, which maybe some people know as this U.S. government organization. They might have seen CIA in movies or spies, something like that. So yeah, you can remember CIAASP. And these letters will stand for all the verbs that'll take you through this writing task number 1. So the first one stands for claims, insists, asserts, argues, states, and then points out that. Okay, so that's how you can remember the verbs that you're going to use. Okay. And then we have the transitions. So I start with all the ones that'll start off my paragraphs. So supporting paragraph number 1 will start with first, and then paragraph number 2 is going to start with next, and then the third one's going to start with finally. And then when I transition over to talk about my lecture, I use however and contrast on the other hand. Cool. And just a little grammar note for everybody out there, you know, I'm always going to put a comma after my transition word. That's a little tip. So I have my commas there. And then at the end of the song, I just put that all together, okay? So all the way that I start a supporting paragraph number 1 and what comes next, that's my starting sentence. This is my transition sentence. And then supporting paragraph 2, here's my starting sentence, my transition sentence, and the last, okay? So I'll just, I'll roll this back. And if you're so inspired, you can sing along too, or just laugh.
That is probably not going to happen. Singing is one of the things that I don't incorporate in my teaching very much. I wish I could, but no, I don't know if this is a real thing, but I feel like I'm tone deaf. I don't know if that's true or not, but I will support you with some head bobbing, and so yeah,
awesome.
there you go.
Yeah.
When I
first started doing this, you know, students who are new to my class would come in and they'd see all the other students like singing along with the lyrics, and their eyes were bugging out of their head and their jaw was on the floor. Like, what did I just step into here? Am I in a TOEFL class? Is this chick crazy? Like, what is going on? And by the second and the third week of, you know, because usually we'd cycle around, it'd be maybe 1 day a week or something, we'd talk about writing task number 1. And usually by the third week, they were jamming. And then when they would go and take the test, and they would come back to me and say, you know what, I sat down at that to write writing task 1, and that song was stuck in my head. Right. And I had it with me. You know, and that's the whole point. The whole point is this annoying song that you can't get out of your head once you know it and once you've heard it, you will be singing it. And that's the whole point, so that it becomes easy for you to remember. So on test day, you'll be stress-free. It'll already be in your mind. You won't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and
So,
I think that's great. Any way you can get that kind of like not muscle memory, but just like any type of like unconscious, subconscious memory to come out is great. Song, whatever it is, repetition.
Yep.
Me, it's usually repetition, not as interesting. So song is probably a lot better. So let's hear it. I'm very curious.
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Writing task number 1, you have 3 minutes to read a reading passage. Then you must listen to a lecture. Then you have 20 minutes to write an essay that summarizes the 3 points made in the reading and how they contrast with the 3 points made in the lecture. Now, there are certain writing structures you can use. You start with an introduction. Both the reading and lecture discuss whatever the topic is. While the reading says that, whatever the reading says, the lecture disagrees. Now, there are certain verbs that you can use. Claims, insists, asserts, argues, states, points out that. There are transitions you can use. First, next, finally. However, in contrast, on the other hand. Hey, are you paying attention? Both the reading and lecture discuss. Both the reading and lecture discuss. While the reading says that, the lecture disagrees. While the reading says that, the lecture disagrees. C-I-A-A-S-P. C-I-A-A-S-P. Claims, insists, asserts, argues, states, points out that. 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 First, next, finally. First, next, finally. First, next, finally. First, next, finally. However, in contrast on the other hand. 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 First, the reading claims that. First, the reading claims that. However, the lecture insists that. However, the lecture insists that. Next, the reading asserts that. Next, the reading asserts that. In contrast, the lecture argues that. In contrast, the lecture argues that. Finally, the reading states that. Finally, the reading states that. On the other hand, the lecture points out that. The lecture points out that.
So thank you for sharing the song, and I'm not going to forget your template now. It's going to be stuck. And so is there any other advice you have for students about writing task 1 or in general, anything that you want to add or anything like that?
I would advise, again, what we talked about before with the paraphrase skill, that's a really important component. Also, of course, listening is going to be an important component. So really practicing listening to lectures, and then getting your writing evaluated by someone that you trust, professional, TOEFL tutor, TOEFL teacher is always really helpful, because then you can really see what exactly in your writing, you need to work on. I have on my site right now a couple of different practice writing task number 1s. I've been told they're a little bit more challenging than the real TOEFL, and I say yay to that, because when you have to kind of step up to a greater challenge, then when you get to the TOEFL, it should be easier. So yeah, hey, I don't want to make it too easy. I gave you an easy cat example today, but I have topic 5G up there. I have one on GMO food. I have one on hydroelectric power. So I keep it really TOEFL related and hopefully relevant to what we're experiencing today too.
Great. And also you help out students as well with lessons in writing. Do you do writing evaluations as well?
I do, yes.
Okay.
And I'm currently teaching a writing course. We have about 10 students in the course now,
Okay.
and they write 2 essays every week.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a 4-week course. It's the second time I've offered it, and it's really amazing because in those 4 weeks you see a huge shift happen.
Right.
Because you are writing pretty consistently. And the group atmosphere is fun for me because I think it holds the students more accountable. They get excited. They get excited about meeting in a live class, and they also know they have to show up for one another. So they're producing a lot of great essays. Sometimes one-on-one, students think that it's going to be really helpful, but sometimes they can get very, I get a lot of A+ personality students with the one-on-ones who want to show me a perfect essay. And they spend 4 hours writing me this perfect essay. But in reality, that's not the TOEFL experience. The TOEFL experience is what can you do in 20 minutes? Or in writing task 2, what can you do in 30 minutes? And how can we make that the best writing it can be on test day? So yeah, with the group class, it's been really fun.
Yeah, so group classes, I think are great. You know, there was somebody was asking me about group classes and was saying how they felt like it wasn't as they couldn't serve a teacher couldn't serve the student as well, you know, in group classes than as privately. And I actually found that the opposite to be true. That the students you know, there's other things besides, it's not really about us. You know, we kind of know, teachers know information, but really knowledge is only part of how you grow. You know, it's the work, it's the kind of motivation you get, it's the people around you. And so being in a group of other people who are also going through the same thing as you is actually a really empowering experience, because you get more motivated, you feel more accountable, and you feel like you're part of something.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's interesting to see, you know, when students talk about their ideas for their essay and maybe they take opposite sides. It's great to listen to each other talk about their different viewpoints, because then they get more ideas. They get, oh, well, you thought of it like this, and isn't that a great example? And I notice sometimes at first students want to tune out to that, like, oh, it's not my essay, so it doesn't refer to me. But in fact, when you listen to someone else, because I always say writing is thinking. It's just putting your thoughts on paper, and they have to be very logically laid out for another reader to make sense of it. And even more logically laid out than actually speaking has to be. So when you're listening to someone else think through one of these questions, you know, you really understand how an argument needs to be laid out academically, how it logically needs to make sense. And so you can then gain information for your own writing, for your own thought processes, maybe saying, wow, this was a really cool idea, or I love that the way the person thought that through. Or on the other hand, something didn't make sense to me with that argument, and in my writing, I got to find out, am I making logical sense as I go from point A to B to C? So yeah, I'm just loving the group dynamic. Of course, you know, I want to keep my class small so I can really give appropriate feedback and, you know, go in depth with each individual student, what their specific needs are. But yeah, I really enjoy the group. It's so much more energized.
Yeah, and also, like you said, you learn a lot from other people, which is great. So anyway, so Kirstyn, TOEFLland.com, I'll put a link there. Thank you so much for sharing, and I think I hope everybody learned a lot. I learned a lot, and thank you for the song. It's going to be stuck in my head for a while.
That's the point.
Yeah. All right, Kirstyn,
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, take care.